I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Dietrich. Jordan Rodelli is on vacation, but Andrew Kuo is here and he has Phase 4 energy. Welcome to Phase 4. How are you, Andrew Kuo?
4 times better than I was before, man. I feel incredible. I'm done with Phase 3, entering Phase 4. It's a new world, man. How you feeling?
Feeling forthright. Like keeping defenses honest. Forthright. So what does Phase 4 mean? I don't think it means anything, right? As far as I can tell. Like, we're talking about New York City's COVID reinstatement plan.
What's your man, your dude, your homie, Mario Cuomo?
Mario.
Oh, I'm so old. Andrew Cuomo say about this?
Andrew Cuomo? I like that we've refrained from using that joke.
That has been my nickname when I played team sports in high school was Kid Pro Quo, which makes sense, or Status Quo, which also made sense. I was a terrible high school player, but I was on those teams, man. I made those teams, so whatever.
You basically just, we're at net zero, status quo.
I was a prom king that couldn't put the ball in the basket and never was prom king, obviously. But
were you a Chuck?
Oh, yeah. My coach was very nice, but he was like, listen, you can shoot pretty good. You can't really handle, and you can't really, D up bigger players. So as soon as you touch the ball, just let it go.
That is a very supportive coach.
Oh, he was great, man. He was just like, I trust you with the ball. You make good decisions. Just shoot it up every time.
Like, my decision is to shoot. He's like, and that's fine.
He's like, don't overthink it. Your job when you're on the court for the brief amount of time on the second team is to just chuck. He's like, find your spot and just chuck.
You're getting on the court. You're not going to play a lot, but when you're out there, get your shots up. Respect.
I was oddly most proud of my on-ball defense. I enjoyed guarding guards. It was my favorite thing.
How was your crouching?
Not as good as my floor slapping. That's for sure.
That was an unexpected tangent to start the show.
Hey, man, you mentioned New York. Where else was I going to go?
So wait, what does Phase 4 do? Because as we were saying, that restaurants and bars and indoor spaces are not reopening. Museums, maybe? Down the line? Galleries? I don't know.
This is about Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball gets going this week, I believe. Yankees and Mets, and they want an excuse to have these games without fans, with cutouts of dogs and JPEGs of their most loyal season ticket holders. And Cuomo and de Blasio just need an excuse to do this. So they're like, yeah, we're in the new phase, so the Yankees can play ball, and we're getting back to normal, I guess.
Yeah, it didn't seem to apply to many of the things that it was initially intended to reopen.
Right. I mean, it's funny because there's no concessions revenue, and all those people without jobs in Citi Field and Yankee Stadium can't work. And that's the problem, right? Like, we keep on saying this virus is a racial thing. Of course it is. Like, the people who make money in games aren't just like the owners who sell tickets. It's people who sell hot dogs and sell beers and get the field ready, and all those people need work, man.
Yeah, the city's sort of structured reopening has led to a bit of an odd place. I think most people who live in, say, Brooklyn aren't really seeing Manhattan much. That we always talk about this being an accelerant. And in that same way as 20 years ago, you always went into the city if you lived in Brooklyn. Always.
Bridge and tunnel, right?
And I'm talking about anybody. If you just moved to New York and couldn't afford to live in Manhattan and you moved to Brooklyn, your social life was in Manhattan.
Yeah, listen
know,
to Funk Master Flex,
get
Stretch
in,
and Bobbito, Ride into the City.
hell yeah, exactly. That entire culture really disappeared, as Brooklyn became more prominent and there were more options for eating and drinking and hanging out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And people moved further and further away from Manhattan, or at least the kind of people who initially probably envisioned themselves as Manhattanites and became Brooklynites as time went on.
I love it. Yeah.
And right now, it's like so accelerated that people who live in Brooklyn like don't go to the city. It's like so sequestered in your own neighborhood because public transportation sucks. Because riding in cabs is inconvenient and kind of scary.
It's
So
like, yeah.
people just don't go into Manhattan who don't live there.
It's even smaller than that. It's like, yo, we're neighbors. Why don't we have a socially responsible distance hang? And it's like, well, you live in Stuyvesant Heights. I live in Bed-Stuy, so like that's kind of not gonna happen. It's I don't know. As your to your point, it's an accelerant that in that it was already happening, and the virus just gave it an excuse. Like, even in the microcosm of my own weird mind, like, someone's like, "Yo, let's hang out in, 15 blocks away from where I am." I'm like, "No, I can't because of COVID." I'm like, "No, I just never want to do that."
Right. It gives you a valid reason.
Yeah.
Because obviously you're fine going 15 blocks.
Yeah,
Like,
for sure. It's
you
no
can
sweat.
do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so Lower Manhattan is really weird right now because most restaurants and bars are giving this the old college try. They're putting seating out front. They've built them to the, qualifications or however they're supposed to be for the city, and then had to rebuild them the way that the city wanted. But now they exist. There's these boxes that are in the street. They're on the sidewalk. It's a little deceptive though, because I tried to go out and grab some dinner on Saturday night, and it was oddly hard to find a place to eat because there aren't that many seats. It looks like there are, but there aren't.
Yeah.
I went by Il Buco.
Oh, you're in the city. Nice.
I was in the city. That's what I'm saying. There was only 6 tables out front.
Bilbuco's kind of, yeah, they haven't really gone for it. The Orchard Street, the police, defund the police, I guess. It's hard to mention the police outside of the context of bullshit, but like, they have cordoned off like a 3 or 4 block radius where all these bars, our buddies like Last Lap and Choi, they are just having block parties. And on Saturday night, it was just jammed. It looked like 4th of July, just like people on the street hanging out. And there was nowhere to sit. So people were just standing next to like where the drinks were,
Yeah, we've seen the COVID shamers are back when it comes to Steinway in Astoria and then Dykeman in the Bronx. Those are the 2 latest targets of fury from the internet mob about people's behavior in public.
I mean, it's wild because they might be right. But like it's funny. Shaming is in our DNA, but also shaming is in our DNA. Like conspiracy theories, I have stopped caring about shaming.
My only thing is that, and again, I'm trying to avoid jumping back into the same debate, is that the outcome is always law enforcement. Like that's my issue with it. It always ends up people complaining, and then they're going to send cops to Dykeman, and we're like, oh, so now we've got a bunch of interactions between, Black and Latino people and the NYPD. Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, our most ethical Cookies Classic, inaugural Cookies Classic, did not have referees, and it worked. But also, it would probably be better with referees, and that was a really tough thing to figure out, right? Like, we had all these people policing themselves, but then invariably one person on each team would become the cop, and I'm like, oh, this is just a natural thing. One person is becoming the ref, and everyone is starting to defer to him because a lot of people don't care, being like, yeah, that is a foul, I agree. And I just think whether they're wearing stripes or they're wearing a jersey, it's just a part of society.
Except in the situation we're talking about, it'd be one thing if people are like, hey, this is getting out of control, take your ass home, or you'll be shamed on the internet. It's like people coming with the power to arrest you and put you in jail and choke you and strangle you and create blemishes on your permanent record that will follow you and affect your employment. There's actual societal life implications by police getting involved with anyone at any time that we know are like deeply troubling and also very biased.
I was thinking about this the other day because I was on the bus and someone refused to wear or didn't have a mask. Someone got on with a cup of coffee, didn't have a mask on, and the bus driver. And in New York City, they're taped off, so only half the bus is riders, and then the front half is just a driver with like a good like 5 or 6 seats that are just empty in front of him with plastic.
The bus bubble.
It's the classic burger bus bub, and someone got on and the driver was like, "Hey buddy, I can't go anywhere because of rules." And he was being awesome. He was like, I have extra masks for this reason. And he dangled a mask. He was just like, you can come in the front and pick up this mask and put it on so I can get people home. And the guy wouldn't do it. The guy was like, no, I'm good. And he's like, listen, I'm going to get fired. I can't drive this bus unless you put this mask on that I'm giving you. And the guy was just like, I'm good. And we sat there for a long time. And it finally moved because everyone in the bus, peer pressure, was just like, hey, can you just like put a mask on? Like just for a second so we can get home. And he was like, no. And then finally he was like, fine. Because a big dude was like, put a mask on, dude. I need to get home. We've been sitting here, you know?
That policy is 100% designed to have vigilantism as the answer.
Well, that was the only answer, right? Because this guy wasn't doing anything.
I agree.
And no one got hurt, and that guy's feathers were ruffled a bit. He put on the mask and immediately took it off when the bus started driving. And I'm like, great. You have a small victory in there somewhere. But, like, I feel like that's a better way than, like, what you're saying, like, punishment. Like, all right, you're coming downtown. It's like someone who's bigger just being like, hey, do us all a favor and just put that mask on.
I mean, the mask debate is so boring, but I still do not understand what's going through people's heads who say, I'm not going to wear a mask in an enclosed public space. It's like, then don't go in there. That's the restriction. It's the same thing of, you know what? And it's even worse, but I don't believe in tipping. But I'm going to go to a restaurant anyway, and I'm not going to tip.
Oh, that happens. Yeah.
Of course that happens, but it's sort of the same idea that, well, I know this is a qualification. You tip when you go into a restaurant. You wear a mask when you go into an enclosed space. But I'm just not going to abide by that.
Yeah.
Like, you were violating a social contract, my dude.
One of my very good friends, maybe 1 out of 5 times we'd eat out, the check would come and they would say, I just don't feel like paying. And it wasn't offensive to me because I really love this friend of mine and they are kooky in harmless ways like that. But it really like upended my whole concept of procedure. Shout out to Gordon Hayward. It was something that every time she did it, I'd be like, whoa, my mind is kind of bent. I will cover you again. But like, yeah, it's such an interesting thing. She was like, I like my meal okay. I just don't want to pay for it. I'm like, is there any reason why you don't want to do this? She was like, it's not the money. I just don't feel like doing it. I'm like, I kind of like this, but we have to pay.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get that going into a bus, a restaurant, a bar with the intention of violating those norms. That just doesn't resonate with how I think.
Yeah, and I love to follow rules. Like, I pay all my taxes that I owe. Like, this is something I do. Like, if a computer is just like, you need to restart, I'm like, I'm going to restart my computer, even though I'm in the middle of something. I abide by the simple kind of procedure. Shout out to Gordon Hayward. But as soon as someone kind of is like, you don't have to restart your computer, I'm like, what? And this is a lot of what the internet does to me, because there's people who are like, you actually don't need to drink a drop of water ever. And I'm like, that also makes sense. Go on, you know, like it's just it's confusing because some people are trying to express something else when they don't wear a mask in a bus.
Yeah, but it's really weird when you go on Twitter and you see a thread and it's these people boasting about how they went into a convenience store and didn't wear a mask. And it's like,
Is that happening?
yeah. And I'm like, I don't get it. You're bragging on the internet about how you were able to get into a 7-Eleven and pay for something without putting a mask on or being told to leave.
Yeah.
Like, that's a weird accomplishment, man.
Twitter is such trash. But eventually, if you're walking around in New York, you will come across somebody who coughs as a point, right? Like every once in a while, maybe it's my neighborhood, but every once in a while, there's someone who coughs. It's like, well, fuck you guys. Yeah, I'm coughing, and I'm like, I don't know what you're trying to accomplish. Like, is this a expression of loneliness? Is this an expression of anger, which is the same thing? Like, okay, you know, like we'll put on our masks if you're coughing, but like that bums me out. That doesn't get a rise out of me, you know.
And some of this is just mental illness.
100%. And like mental illness is such a spectrum. Like if we see someone limping, we're immediately like, what is that? Ankle? Knee? I've had that before. Da da da. You know, this is what you should do. And as soon as we see someone behaving like that, we're just like, oh, you're the worst person. I'm like, I don't know if it's a decision or not.
Well, right. So in restaurants in New York, the staff all wears masks, and once you're seated, you don't wear a mask, and the seats are set up 6 feet apart, or there's sort of barriers between them.
But you can sit with your loved ones and friends.
Yeah, you can sit with whoever you come with, but there are not communal tables in terms of you sitting with strangers. Everything is sort of separated, or again, there's like literal walls and like plexiglass separating tables. So it's a bit of a bewildering situation to try to go out to dinner right now because, for one, places just don't have many seats. Other ones are, they're just giving you paper plates and takeout stuff and you're just eating in front of them. Other ones are giving you silverware and refilling your glass and doing fine dining. Other ones are, we're not letting people sit after 9. Other places are serving until midnight. It's a bizarre time to try to go out and be like, let's grab dinner.
Oh, yeah.
But enough places are open that there are really good restaurants giving this a shot.
I was going to text you because I was walking by Peter Luger. It was 9 o'clock, and my wife had never had Peter Luger, and there was empty seats in the style you were talking about, like with plastic partitions, the table like four tops, and half of them were empty. And she was like, I would like to try this once. Can we do this? And I'm like, yeah, sure, we can have a steak, and I walked up and it was classic Peter Luger, our whole Peter Luger theory. I walked in, I was like, hey, you guys doing walk-ins at all? Like, close buddy. And I was like, okay, why am I getting yelled at? I was like, no. And they were just like skirting me out of there. And I was just like, 5 of you are just standing here yelling at me. I was like, this is already not worth it. They're like, we have to close. And I walked across the bridge, and in the Lower East Side, like, restaurants were serving well past 9 p.m. Luger theory, man.
Yeah, I don't know what the rule is on when anything has to close.
Yeah.
Because there was a point when I believed outdoor seating could only be there until 10, but maybe that's changed because I saw places, out at midnight with people sitting out front and hanging out, and not in some shameful, dangerous way. It was just people sitting outside in their socially distant tables having a beer, which is, to me, how it should be done right now. But there doesn't seem to be any consistency in how late they can be open. Is it by choice? Is it by law? Like, where are they allowed to be? It's all very baffling and seems like it could use maybe a more laissez-faire approach and say, just do whatever you want versus, all these places fearing that they're going to run afoul of the law. And everyone I talked to was fairly distraught about the latest from Cuomo, which was that restaurants need to offer food and to sell food along with beverages if people are going to sit. And they're like, I don't know what this is about other than it seems designed to destroy me.
Well, there's the restaurant people that I know and the bar people I know, like in New York City, liquor licenses have that stipulation as well. And you just put like a 25-cent bag of potato chips on the counter and you're good. Like one of my friends opened a bar and he was like, oh, maybe I'll have like a deli. Maybe I'll hire like a mid-tier deli to serve sandwiches in the corner like a lot of bars do, you know? And then he found out he could just have a bag of chips hanging and he's like, oh, done.
Yes, right. So that's how I assumed everyone would be getting away with it, but there might have even been like
It has to be
some
like a
further
proper
stipulation that it has to be like at
Food
least
pyramid.
a burger, like a burger bubble or something.
I mean, the answer to all of this to me is unrealistic, but it's basically incentive. And I've said this so many times on this show. It's like all you have to do is incentivize these restaurants to be safe, which is give them a ton of money, triple their PPP. So they're like, so we tell them like, you don't have to serve food to try to stay afloat. We will give you the money indefinitely to stay open. However much you apply, we'll give it to you. We'll review it really quickly and give it to you. And so you don't have to take this risk. And for the patrons, you're shit out of luck. You don't have these restaurants, but they're good to go. When this is all over, they can reopen.
But that's not what even this is really about, though, because these places are trying to be open and they're not doing anything that's unsafe. It's like,
Are you sure? This is very unsafe.
which part?
I mean,
I
this
think
is a
the
debate we have all the time. But like,
I'm just saying, I think the stipulation to have places that are fundamentally bars make them start serving food is far more unsafe than the alternative.
the alternative being closing.
No, not serving food.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, add finger food to the equation and
Yeah.
waiters and a bunch of people cooking together in a hot room. Like, why would you want bars to start trying to serve food? That's not what they do. Let them serve chips if that's going to be like your.
Are you
know,
sure the
loophole.
stipulation is like hot cooked food?
Yeah, apparently in some places they're adding that in. I don't know if it's exactly in New York, but I read that it's like you can't get away with a bag of chips. It has to be like something that's cooked. But
This
we'll
is
see.
this is such an easy hack, right? A toaster and a loaf of bread, right? Like what? Or some cheese, being like, I make the best grilled cheese sandwiches on the block. Like, what do you do? It's like I have this toaster and I put American cheese in the middle.
Yeah, I don't, but that's kind of what I was saying before. It's all very bewildering. I don't think anyone knows specifically what they have to do to stay compliant. Because, like, you know, when I went by a restaurant, we were waiting for a table. And, like, could we get a glass of wine? Like, oh, we can't because, like, we can't serve you food while you're standing up and waiting because you're not at a table. So it's not a drink to go, technically. It does not make sense.
Also, let's not forget, restaurants aren't just restaurants. Restaurants have skill levels involved, built in. Like a basketball player is just not a basketball player. There's a difference between ISO Zoe and Carmelo Anthony, right? So when I see some restaurants being like, I am cornered over here, I have no options, I'm like, are you sure? Like, there's every case is different, and I think unfortunately the curve is really tough right now because everyone's has been dealt a bad hand. But there's certain people who can like play their way out of that hand, and there's certain people that can't. And I think of one of our favorite cookies restaurants, Gaia, on Houston, and you told me they had to close, and they're amazing, but they can't put outdoor seating on Houston Street.
Some of it's just completely arbitrary based on criteria that no one would have taken into account when signing a lease.
Yeah, totally.
Like Gaia is a downstairs spot on Houston. It is
wonderful.
not an ideal place to put a restaurant, and then I'm sure was reflected in the price, which was then passed along in savings to the consumer because Gaia was an incredibly good, very cheap, wonderful neighborhood restaurant.
You bust your own table. You walk through the kitchen to go to the bathroom. It was awesome.
Love that place. And we went there many times after recording cookies for No Wave back in
Perfect
the day.
pods. Yeah.
Many perfect pods ended with perfect pasta
It was an awesome restaurant.
Perfect paninis.
The owner was the best. Is the
So
best.
she's closing at the end of July, is what I heard. So maybe you could get a little takeout to go if you're feeling nostalgic for a place that still exists.
Some nice beans in the little personal pan tray cooked in the oven.
I hope she gets another shot because that place is awesome.
Agreed.
But if you compare that to, say, Kiki's, which is on Division Street
They're rolling.
near Dime Square, where
Yeah.
Quo rules with an iron fist. But they had the good fortune of not only having a long building where they can put seating all along the side of their own property, but it goes around the corner, so they have that as well. And they put a spot across the street where they sell, I think, like little skewers and things, but that also gives them seating over there. They've opened up the windows that they had and put seating that's kind of inside,
Oh, they did that?
but it's open on one side.
Sure.
So like they have a tremendous amount of seating, and it's jammed over there, and they are doing incredible business.
Yeah.
It's like they are crushing it in a way that other places who just don't have that kind of sidewalk, storefront,
Yeah.
street real estate would never have the opportunity to do. And it's not because Kiki's thought this out; they just happen to have that situation.
Yeah.
Like, what is Estella doing?
Yeah. Right.
I
Yeah.
don't
they're on
know.
Houston. Yeah.
But right, Estella's one of the best restaurants in America. It's where Barack Obama came to eat. It happens to also be upstairs on Houston Street above Milano's.
It's a great restaurant. And their sister restaurant, Cafe Ultra Paradiso, which is equally amazing, is probably having a great time because they have an island, a median in front of their restaurant. So they're probably doing a really nice job of outdoor seating.
And I got to say, our friends of the pod over at Chez Matant in Greenpoint, another spectacular restaurant.
Huge.
Going there feels very normal because they had outdoor patio seating.
Yes.
It's the same seats that were pre-COVID.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are places that were just better built for this moment, not necessarily by scheme, but
Yeah.
just good luck.
Yeah, and to that point, one of my friends, our mutual friends, owned a bar, and the city was trying to get them out. Eventually, they succeeded, but one of the ways to get them out was they put up scaffolding over their brick and mortar storefront, all the way up the building for no reason, to try to just like deter their profits, and it worked. The owner was like, having the scaffolding up affects us by a certain percentage every month through the year. The minute they got evicted, they took the scaffolding down. That day, it was so mean.
That's very fucked up. And I believe that economic impact. I think it's the same way that it's tough to have a thriving business beneath an elevated subway track.
Oh my God, yeah.
Like you can have a sneaker store beneath Broadway,
Yeah.
but if you're trying to open a nice spot, you just would not put it under like a rattling, sky darkening train track. It's just unappealing.
I've had a studio 5 feet from that train track, the JM on Broadway, for years, and the only reason I have it is because you can't convert it to anything else. Like, no one wants to live there and no business wants to set up there. It's just like, yeah, does a dirty painter want to just sit here in the quiet, dripping water on their stuff? I'm like, yeah, I'll pay you like rent for that. Yeah, it's impossible. Like, one of the mistakes the city made was a lot, but putting train tracks above ground, putting highways on our waterfronts. It's putting the park in the middle. The park should have been on the sides. It's weird.
The highways, like the FDR and the Henry Hudson, West Side Highway, just brutal.
It's a shame. It's a real shame.
The fact that New York is an island that does not feel like an island is a cataclysm of urban planning.
Yeah, and maybe that's a motivation to move to Jersey, Staten Island, and Brooklyn, because there are no highways on the waterfronts. I mean, now there's like priced out rich condos, like expensive luxury condos there, but you can still access it by foot.
What's interesting, going back to the idea of accelerationism, is that in the same way I think people wanted to make more use of those same waterways, that's kind of become places where people hang out a lot more now. Like people are hanging out along the East River, you know, in the parks and the areas along the water. And that's happening out in Brooklyn too. Because if you don't have bars and restaurants, you know, where you can hang out late and you want to be around people and outdoors in a place that's safer, why not have a view? Why not see the bridges? Why not be able to see water? And it's like that out here in Greenpoint too.
Yeah.
At like 4 a.m, there's people out there playing music, all Pop Smoke.
Old album, right?
Only Pop Smoke. It was like 3 different people playing Pop Smoke simultaneously from different vehicles with people sort of dancing in front of them. It's kind of a medley.
I love it. I love it. It's the anthem of the summer for sure. Yeah, I mean, COVID exposes all this stuff, right? And my contention is the administration exposes all this stuff. COVID is just kind of something that triggers what the administration is doing wrong. But and whether that be the White House or the New York, like your boy Cuomo or your best friend Bill de Blasio, I think it really exposes what we do wrong, and not only in our policy, but in our architecture, in the structure of the way we live. I've always wondered why we keep trash on our street corners. Like, that is a solution that alleys were created for. You know, like in New York City, when you walk around on trash day, there's just trash on the street.
It does raise those questions of why there has been such a misuse of public spaces as well.
Yeah.
In New York. We're
Yeah.
like, well, why weren't people able to drink outside and eat outside and congregate, you know,
After dusk.
yeah, it doesn't make sense. And it's also strange that I feel like there's certain people who will look at those situations and be like, I'm not eating outside. That's crazy. You madmen and your outdoor slices. Like, I'm staying holed up. But like, this is what it was supposed to happen, right? And this is what's happening all over the world, was that the lockdown had a specific goal, which was flattening the proverbial curve, making sure that the virus didn't go, or trying to prevent the virus from going haywire through a population, preventing the overloading of healthcare systems, etc. And like, everyone in the world is doing the same kind of, you know, piecemeal reopening. Yeah. And like, unless you're planning on holding it down in a little rat's nest until there's a vaccine, like, these sort of versions of cities are kind of all we got. Like, it's inevitable that it's going to look like this. So I don't know. I feel like New York is slowly getting less interesting but more functional, as opposed to how it was, say, like a month ago. Because people are back who left. People who fled and went back to home. People who went to Jersey. People who went upstate. They're like coming back to the city because New York is pretty safe now in comparison to other parts of the country. So like, it's not the weird vacant city that it was in April.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. The tourists are gone, but the long-term tourists have come back.
Yeah.
Like, the people are just spending their 20s and early 30s here. And now that we're not in our 20s and early 30s, a lot of my friends have decided to move away from New York. When I say a lot, I mean, like, I can think of 3 or 4 who are just like, I'm going to just not come back to my apartment and put it on the market and stay in upstate, or it's mostly like Westchester and upstate. And I'm like, oh, this is how the people like Bloomberg win, right? Like, not that my friends were that, like, you know, they weren't mad at Bloomberg per se, but it's not going to let affordable housing take over. It's going to convert everything into like a higher bracket. The more you vacate things, like, the more opportunity there is for investment, and that doesn't really help like people like us, you know.
And by that same token, right, when you see Black and Latino people being vilified for hanging in the street on Dyckman or on Steinway, we're saying, no, the preferential way of doing that is sitting outside an expensive restaurant and where everyone is, socially distanced. That's the right way of existing in this new city. It's like, well, that's not really fair. Well, if you're willing to, drop $150 on dinner and have fine china, that's acceptable. But like just going to a street and hanging out outside and having a beer that you picked up, from the corner store, socializing outdoors in a group of people, like that's unacceptable. So like that's why I always get uneasy about these kind of things, because to your point, like what kind of city do we want to be? Do we want to be one where it's acceptable to socialize as long as you can sit outside at Odeon? Like that's okay to do.
Yeah.
But you can't just go to Orchard Street and have a beer. I don't know.
Yeah, it eliminates a certain demographic, and with the assumption that demographic will just like adjust to it. But it takes away joy, I think, to just have like the Dime Square being accessible to certain people. It takes
Right. It's okay to have a $7, IPA and sit at a table. That's okay. But
you can't walk around with a brown bag.
exactly. And this is how we see this happen all the time. The laws are technically the same for everybody, but the way they're enforced is incredibly selective.
Yeah, this is Bloomberg's vision, man. Hudson Yards is his trophy.
No one can have open containers. Wink, wink.
Yeah. I mean, but there is like a little law enforcement in my neighborhood. I have not witnessed anything. The highs and lows of my neighborhood have never been clearer. The people that I see every day who need help, who are probably addicted to drugs, I see them shooting up like just on my doorstep. And I know them now, because they're just like there every day. And I'm like, there needs to be some help. Like, I don't know if their family members can help. I don't know if me giving them like $40 even helps. I don't even know if they want help. And I'm like, oh, this is a real systemic issue. And then I walk a few blocks and I'm like, oh, people are having a good time. It's jarring. And talk about accelerationism. This was kind of apparent if you looked hard enough a year ago, but now it's just in plain sight.
For sure. But yeah, I think this is just how it has to be right now. That's generally my takeaway when people get enraged by crowds on the street. I'm like, this is how it's going to be. And I don't think New York is going to have a major spike in a meaningful way because we've cut out the opportunities for the super spreader. And until you have bars open and restaurants open and concert venues and art galleries and all these places where one person can just breathe out, little COVID spores and they go dropleting around the entire place like a carpet of COVID and everyone in that room gets sick, I just don't see how we'll have a huge spike. You'll have people, rising up. And that's what's happened over the last few weeks since they've opened up more businesses. And you see the straight line.
Yeah.
It's a straight line. Like, look, there are new cases of COVID in neighborhoods that are not populated by essential workers. And you're like, well, no shit, because you just opened up a bunch of businesses that are non-essential businesses. And that's inevitable.
Yeah.
But let's not blame it on street beers. Let's say what happened. Hey, you work in a restaurant or a bar or a coffee shop or a bookstore, all these other businesses that brings you now under the same roof as someone else.
Yeah.
And you guys have to be vigilant. Customers leave and you guys all want to hang out in there and you take your masks off because they're uncomfortable and your coworkers. But that's exactly how this is going to keep spreading around. Your roommate gets it, you have it, you don't know. You go into work, customers leave, you take your mask off and you breathe it around. And two of your coworkers get sick and they take it home to their spouse. And that's how this thing's going to lurk around at the periphery, unfortunately, until fall or inevitably until we get a vaccine.
Yeah, and this is sort of like the way we have to think about this White House or this Senate. It's like they are going to misbehave in predictable ways. And I think in general, our population because this is all behavioral, and our population is going to misbehave in very predictable ways, and we have to account for that. And I agree. I don't, and I know very little, almost nothing, but I don't think we're going to see a spike like we did in March. But we might see a little uptick, and then it's going to reverberate with deaths because there's always a delay, and we can expect this. You know, people who are like 2020, the last 4 years, what the hell? And I'm like, at least these are very predictable problems we have. Our government does not behave in unpredictable ways, and this virus is not unpredictable.
I agree. And I think it's exactly that. This is all inevitable as you try to reopen. This was always going to happen. And my final thing on this is that let's not focus all of our energy on street beers and people hanging out on Dykeman, but say, hey, you guys really got to be vigilant. I know you're at your store, your restaurant, your bar, and it's after hours and you want to hang out with your coworkers and get a little socializing in. Like, you really got to keep the masks on, guys. I know it sucks.
Yeah.
That's the actual real risk, is hundreds of thousands, if not 1 million people going back to work indoors, even though customers and everyone's wearing masks during the day for the most part. Yeah. But, you know, I went to get my car checked out to get an inspection.
Cookies whip, the cookies
whip.
wagon. Yeah,
I went to get it inspected. They weren't wearing masks in there. The main mechanic just in his office, not wearing a mask. I'm like, this is the actual danger.
Yes.
The real danger is the day after day after day, people just not wearing masks around each other. That's how it spreads. Not like one wild Saturday with a stripper on the street.
Well, that also can happen too. But like, yeah, I agree with you in that it's like wanting it more. This whole basketball thing of wanting it more. And okay, you're in the finals, game 7, 1 quarter left. You look at Richard Jefferson and you're like, okay, don't shoot, man. This is not your time. You're on the court. You're in there. This is, give it to the man. It's LeBron time. And that's how I feel about these. That's why I mentioned skill, because Richard Jefferson is a wonderful basketball player who had a long career, who's so good at this thing. He's a genius, but it's not his time. And just like fall in place, man. This is LeBron's to win or lose because he's the best player on the planet. And I feel like with restaurants and people on the street, there's so many varying degrees of points of view and skills and everything. And when someone doesn't want to wear a mask, I always think to myself, it's like, first, they don't want it enough, and second, oh, you don't have the skill set. The skill set you have of like following an instruction for the betterment of your community is not in your holster. So I recognize that, and you're Richard Jefferson. You're good at other things, but damn, if we can all be a little bit more like with LeBron James, it would really help everything.
We spent a lot of time last pod talking about a murder case on Houston Street that seemed to be involving an international conspiracy of potential assassins. And there was a young tech baron who was killed, and he had his body sawed apart. And he had business relationships in places like Nigeria, Colombia, and Bangladesh. As it turned out, it was apparently or allegedly his assistant who killed him.
Yeah, the story as I know it, as it was reported, was the assistant had stolen a few $1,000s from him unknowingly from the tech baron. And the tech baron was made aware of this, but instead of taking legal action or firing him, asked him to pay it back in a payment plan system. And then something happened, and the assistant murdered the tech baron. We joked about it last pod because it was so abstract, right? Like I couldn't wrap my head around the details of this story. It just really like gripped all these stories I had in my imagination and like took it for a ride. And now that we know more, it's like I feel truly like horrified by it. And it's weird how a little information can like point you one way and point you another.
Yeah, it was one of those cases where it sounded mysterious, and obviously romantic is the wrong word, but there was a sense of like wonder, like how is this happening in today's world? And it just ended up being a dreary, tragic story of, a
Thievery. Yeah.
theft, power dynamics, interpersonal beef.
Mental illness. I'm sure.
It just ended up being a sad story that sucked.
Yeah.
And I felt kind of guilty about, all the jokes that you made last week.
Yeah.
It ended up just being another sad, tragic tale. And I took that as a reminder. When you start seeing conspiratorial talk, like this judge in New Jersey, someone came to their door, shot and killed her son, shot and wounded her husband, and it came out that she is overlooking a case involving Deutsche Bank that's tied to Epstein, and it went really
Loosely
fast.
tied. Yeah.
And it went really quickly into this is an organized hit.
She is the lawyer in the Epstein case. That's what people are saying.
And look, not saying those things aren't possible here because powerful people do bad stuff.
Yeah.
But after the murder of the, quote, Elon Musk of the third world, unquote, it made me slow my roll.
Yeah. John Oliver did a whole half an hour segment or 20-minute segment on conspiracy theories last night, which was funny and good. I'm a fan of his. And people have been really talking about this subject a lot because, our president's on a roll with all of his talk about the virus and his political opponents. And, for the last few years, I've been really trying to be aware of the things I believe just because they're either entertaining or they make some sense in my mind. Like, for example, Michael Jordan's father was murdered by bookies. The world is run by 1%, or what are other popular ones that we can believe that we accept, and then it's confusing because you hear a lot of seductive stories that kind of can take you to places that you want to go. Like, yes, that's why Michael Jordan had to step away from basketball, quitting the first time. But then UFOs turn out to be kind of closer to conspiracy than not, right? And it's confusing because there are examples that kind of defy your logical process. And it's important to isolate those and not just be like the whole world is a conspiracy, because it's not. And if you believe in conspiracies, even hearing us say these words sounds conspiratorial.
Well, conspiracy theories are appealing because some of them are true.
They can be.
Yeah, well, of course. Like Iran-Contra, or the experiments on black soldiers. Like,
that's not a conspiracy, though. Those are just hidden kind of news stories. Conspiracy would be like
Iran-Contra would qualify as a conspiracy.
Yeah, maybe Ollie North. One that kind of rings true to me that I don't know enough about, but it sounds correct to me and I believe it, is like the prison system is meant to target a certain demographic. And, Kamala Harris and people who are in jail for certain reasons that we kind of forgive them for now was maybe like by accident a cultural thing that was attached to enforcement, and I believe that conspiracy a little bit, if you want to call it that. That just might be procedure, right?
Well, right. Like, what's systemic and what's conspiratorial?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because America's oppression of black people is not a conspiracy. It's what they do. It's overt. Mm-hmm. It's not like, oh, wow, we uncovered a grand conspiracy in which America is going to disproportionately incarcerate and, kill black people. Like, no shit.
But you'd be surprised. I mean, you would not be surprised at the pushback you'd get for that.
But I'm saying I don't think it's a conspiracy.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And, I don't think a lot of these things are conspiracies. Like, Pizzagate is a conspiracy, right?
Like, do I think there's a conspiracy that both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are opposed to universal health care? Yes. But I also think the conspiracy is that lobbyists from the healthcare industry paid him off. Like, there are conspiring people in this. So it comes down to, what are we calling a conspiracy?
Like
Is it
landing
just-
on the moon, right? Or claiming
or is
that
it
the
just
Earth is
multiple,
round.
right? Or is it just multiple people working together behind the scenes to get a result that they want? Like, you talk about the Sixers. Well, Colangelo Sr., Jerry, being brought into the organization by Adam Silver, that was a conspiracy. There was multiple components operating out of the view of the public between ownership, the NBA league offices. Like, that was a conspiracy, like,
Yeah.
technically speaking.
But away from the technicality of what that word means, what we're talking about, like, oh, this tech guy was killed by an assassin sent from the third world, and there's a shadowy kind of system that operates independently of government law, like that kind of stuff. I think that's different than, like, I'm gonna conspire to get a pepperoni pizza and not a plain pizza.
Right? You'd have to conspire with, like, a pizzeria.
Yeah.
And be like, okay, I've got a ravioli guy, I've got a pizza guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to conspire to get the ravioli onto the pizza and then bring it to my house. Like, that would technically be a conspiracy.
Yeah, and I'm less interested about the technicality of this idea than, like, the eye test of this idea, because it is so much based around feeling. And I'm less interested in being like, well, that's technically a conspiracy. I'm like, we go with stories that make sense to us, like wanting it more in basketball. It's like, I just don't think that exists. Is it a conspiracy? Not technically. Is it something we believe because it makes convenient sense? Probably, And Trump pushing ideas and not siding with any ideas and just introducing ideas like, well, I think Joe Biden's son is this and that. And then introducing that is a form of conspiracy, but it's not technically a conspiracy.
Right. I know what you're saying. That you're not really talking about conspiracy as being
A mechanism.
a conspiracy, as in multiple parties conspiring. You're talking about it as being sort of a baseless explanation for something, or the dark underpinnings of society. And, like, it's really nuts when you see the NYPD, like the head of their union, going on TV multiple times with a QAnon mug prominently displayed both times.
So funny, man.
You're like, that's just wild, man.
Yeah.
That's just wild.
Yeah.
And maybe he would write it off as a joke. Oh, I didn't even know. Someone gave it to me. I thought it was funny to put out there.
Yeah.
But what if the head of the NYPD police union really believes in QAnon? That's unacceptable.
Well, this is the James Harden story, right? The thin blue line mask that he put on and posts on social media. Immediately, people were like, this makes total sense. He's actually, like, on the other side, and the way he plays basketball kind of aligns with the way he thinks about law enforcement. And then he was like, oh, I didn't know. And I'm like, that seems like closer to the truth. It's like Occam's razor, right? The most probable outcome is the most probable reason for an outcome is probably the reason.
Yeah, there was a group chat where people were talking about it, and my response was, I'm pretty sure he just thought it looked cool.
Yeah, totally.
And then, like, an hour later, Harden, like, quote, I just thought it looked cool. I was like, that was the obvious reason he wore it. Not, he wanted to support the cops and enrage people.
It was a black and white skull with a flag. Yeah,
He
totally.
saw, like,
It
a
looks
blue
cool.
flag with a skull, and it's like, is that Punisher? This is badass.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I read this comic book. Totally. And and when you think about it in basketball terms, we do this all the time, right? It's like the refs conspired against Jordan's opponents to give him fouls. It's like, or maybe they missed a couple calls and the other team fouled Jordan a lot.
This is where you get into Tim Donaghy's accusations. Like, I don't know if he's of course a liar. We know that.
He went to jail.
But do I believe that the NBA wanted the Lakers to beat the Kings in that playoff series?
Probably, right?
Probably. Do I think they wanted that to have, like, go to a game 7? Probably. But just because the league wants it also doesn't mean they did something to make it happen.
Frozen envelope. Like, do we believe that the Knicks got Ewing because like there was a colder envelope in the bag, or the tumbler, or there was like a different corner of the card? It's like, no, the Knicks just won that lottery.
But at the same time, this is not to dispute that, but at the same time, it is very tantalizing because the NBA wanted the Knicks to get Ewing, and he ended up there. And they beat the odds for that to happen. So therefore, we can look at it and say, I bet they made this happen to get the desired result. Instead of saying, the league wanted it, Ewing wanted it, the Knicks wanted it. The NBA needed this to happen so bad to save the marquee franchise in New York City, and they had to have it happen, and they did it. Versus being like, and they got lucky.
Yeah,
It happened.
right.
Because like LeBron, of course, Dan Gilbert wanted to go to the Cavs. Of course, he wanted to go to the Cavs. They tanked rampantly in order to get that top pick in the draft, or to have the most lottery balls. They were, a horrific team. But like, was that better for everyone if LeBron went to Cleveland? I don't know, but it looks like a conspiracy.
I had like an ongoing 5-year debate with one of my NBA buddies about that exact thing. He thought the NBA had rigged the lottery year after year to favor the Cavs. I'm like, the Cavs? And then when LeBron left, he was like, oh no, maybe not. But like, it really fit because they kept on getting good pick after good pick and blowing them. But then, I think of like every single magician, if you really get in their mind, they're like, is it a conspiracy or is it sleight of hand? Is that a conspiracy? Like, do we believe the people looking after those envelopes, and do all those envelopes just say Knicks on them?
So I would say that New Orleans was one of the last places the NBA would have wanted Zion to go.
I agree. And we don't claim conspiracy there. But if he goes to New York, we claim conspiracy, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And
That's what I'm saying. It's so tantalizing when the result is what people want.
Yeah.
When it's not what people want, like, oh no conspiracy. That's legit.
Yeah.
Yep. New Orleans won it fair and square.
Yeah.
Because who on earth would have wanted Zion to go to New Orleans?
And I think the BMM is less a conspiracy and more cultural. Like, I don't think they're plotting to make Jason Tatum. Somehow he's risen up the ranks by playing no games from like on the bubble of being an East All-Star to the second best player in the East by doing nothing during COVID and this lockdown. And that is less people conspiring to make us believe that he's actually a great player than just a cultural thing that people do.
Because I would say it looks a lot like a vast conspiracy.
Well, I think it's like
Almost
a religion. Is religion
an organized crime family? I don't know. Cradle of Liberty mafioso? Is that what I'm looking for here?
It's a COD conspiracy. I just think it's cultural because it's really hard to keep a secret under wraps, and a conspiracy would assume that there would be like, I think of the Skulls or like the Freemasons. We always thought the Freemasons ran New York, but it turns out it was just like a really loose union. Like, what do the Freemasons mean? What do these markers on these Midtown buildings mean? Are they signals to other Freemasons? Do they describe a secret society? It's like, no, it was Art Deco, and it was like a really loose union. They were like, make sure we get paid the same amount of money. And it fell apart, And I think that's more like the BMM, although very powerful in the basketball media world for sure. They run it. But I think that's, to me personally, I think it's cultural. If it wasn't Tatum, it would just be their next best rookie or drafted player.
It would be Jaylen Brown.
Yeah.
But what's kind of odd about this hiatus is that it's reached the point where it's about the length of an offseason.
Mm-hmm.
When the league shut down in March, the idea was that it would be for a month, a few weeks.
God, I thought it was a few weeks, man.
Yeah, everyone did. But as it turned out, it was more or less the length of an offseason. It's going to start again in August. That's March, April, May, June, July. 5 months, 4.5 months. That's an NBA offseason. So with that in mind, I feel like people have treated this like an off season in terms of their discussions and their ideas, because with Tatum, as you said, he hasn't played, and yet he's talked about as if he's this like superstar. Oh, he's the second best player in the Eastern Conference. Like, nothing's changed, man.
Yeah, I know. He hasn't played a game.
Nothing happened.
He was barely an all-star.
And you're seeing it with this optimism about the Sixers, which is really funny because Sixers fans, and I'm not even including myself here, we're so down on the team. You know, we had an article on Cookies Hoops website where I wrote, like, people shouldn't freak out about the Sixers. They have two really good players. They're fine. Brett Brown's a good coach. Like, don't worry about things. It's all right. People lost their fucking shit about the Sixers when they would lose a couple games in a row. It was one of the most toxic seasons I've ever seen of a team that was like on pace for 50 wins when it was healthy. It was outrageous. Every time the Sixers would lose, people would just flip their lid online. It was insane. Screaming for the firing of Brett Brown, screaming to trade Embiid, screaming to trade Simmons. And now all of a sudden, you have this kind of refresher that's like an offseason. Have you seen Ben Simmons hit a couple threes? Do you think he's going to be raining threes upon people?
Guys,
Like
I hate to say
like,
this. I think the Sixers have a chance.
It's so weird. Like, nothing changed.
Yeah. Yeah, they're a good team. And to me, the most interesting part of the NBA, aside from all-stars and, you know, players like Simmons and Embiid, is the introduction of a player like Shake Milton. The psychology behind that. It's Jeremy Lin-esque to me. He has a cool name. They're usually guards that kind of like come out of nowhere, like, and are unheralded and be like, is this a diamond in the rough that can push us over the top? And I think Shake Milton's an awesome player and a great fit. Is he Kemba Walker? No. Is he better than Jared Bayless? Absolutely. But I think this ties into dribble bias a little bit because Shake can capture our imagination in ways that is really intoxicating. And you see when he performs well. Right before the league went into hiatus, Shake had a couple big games on a big stage. And it's like, is he the answer? He is the thing that moves the needle. I'm like, no, it's Simmons and Embiid. Those are your guys. Like, they are the pillars of your team, and nothing has changed.
Yeah, I think Shake is a good player to insert in the starting lineup because they did not have guys with guard skills on the floor. And Shake can shoot.
Yeah.
He's not an incredible ball handler. You know, he's not, despite his name, he's not going to like cross you into oblivion. He's not an incredible finisher.
Yeah.
But Shake has good basketball IQ. Mm-hmm. He sees the floor well. He doesn't take bad shots. He can pass, and he can knock down jumpers, you know, when he's spacing the floor.
Sounds like a dream. Yeah, I'm into it.
I think he's perfect.
Yeah.
You know, out of their options.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and you know what I'm talking about. Like, he colors this restart in the Burger Bub in the same way like we're drawn to Jeremy Lin's. And he is a way to talk about the team in a new way. But really, we're seeing the same Knicks and the same Sixers. But inserting this new wrinkle is appealing.
But like we saw, Ben Simmons proved that he doesn't need to shoot threes. And we're just doing the last offseason again. Ooh, but there's a video of him shooting threes. Do you think he can shoot threes? No, yeah, he's going to shoot threes. He's going to keep the defense forthright, like it's phase 4.
Yeah. Yeah, that clip that went viral of him doing that turnaround corner jumper and swishing that corner 3. It's like that was enough to change people's minds, or maybe revert back to that song that they're used to humming. You know, when you hear Journey in a supermarket and you're humming it all day, be like, right. Maybe we can space the floor. Maybe this is the emergence of Simmons as the deadliest weapon in the NBA.
I'm going to be honest. I don't know why the Sixers would put those clips up. You know how people villainized him for that.
Yeah.
You saw that happen.
Yeah.
And it's like, as I said, people just went into off-season mode. Oh, Ben Simmons shooting 3. How cool is that? Let's put that up. Dude, what are you doing? You saw the guy get like raked over the coals for months on end because he wouldn't shoot threes. and then just destroy everyone without doing it, averaging something like 22, 10, and 10 on 65% shooting over his last 15 healthy games, just annihilate the entire idea that he needs to shoot threes. And now they're like, ooh, here's a clip, put it up.
I like all
What's
clips
wrong with
though.
you?
I think the way you accept it will be the conspiracy. Holding it back would be a conspiracy accusation. But I think this is the thing. There is no hiding Ben Simmons draining corner jumpers. This is the NBA. This is being a fan. This is following the NBA. So not releasing it just seems odd.
But they
to me.
never put out practice footage.
Yeah, sure, but I mean,
Like, you're making an exception for the burger bubble,
But remember
doing
when
exactly what, like,
Remember when
you know-
Mitchell Robinson hit that three and we were like, oh, let's talk about that. Mitchell Robinson, big time. And this is just being a fan. I mean, obviously the practices are closed because of strategy. But when players are warming
that's what
up,
I'm saying.
when players are warming up, like
this
we
was
get
not
this.
warm-ups, of course, but this was not warm-ups. This was in-game scrimmage that the Sixers put out.
Are you
And
claiming a
I'm-
conspiracy?
I'm saying I think it was a poor decision. I think
That's
if
fair.
Ben Simmons is shooting threes, I would keep that under wraps. In exactly what you said, a competitive advantage. If he's really going to unveil a bunch of threes, then don't let people know. Don't get false hopes up. Don't do the exact same thing that happened last summer that you saw have negative consequences.
I mean, the
By the way,
Sixers are just stuck. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Shake's numbers from his last couple weeks, put up 19 a game, 4 assists, 1.6 turnovers, took care of the rock, doesn't rebound, but he shot 60% from three. So I just hope people don't have
Unrealistic. The Tatum-esque expectations.
Yeah, I think Shake can shoot. I think he does have good basketball IQ and makes the right decisions, but he's not a guy who can really bust people's ass off the dribble. He's not a great defender, and I'm pretty sure he's not going to shoot 60% from three.
He reminds me most of Knicks and Sixers legend Alexei Shved. Their games mirror each other to me. Same size a little bit, same build, but wonderful players to have on your team. I'm into it. Get them on your team. And Shake is cheap and he's under control for a few years, and I love identifying and sticking with him.
They were lucky that I think he was drafted in the year when Brett Brown was helming the draft.
Oh, great move.
That was the year they traded back with Zaire, who's unfortunately hurt again, and scooped up a pick that they sent to the Clippers in the Tobias Harris deal.
Yeah.
But they got Milton that year, I'm fairly sure. But to Elton's credit, they did extend him to a contract
An
where he makes
affordable one, right?
basically nothing for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
That sucks for Shake, but for the Sixers, it's a team-friendly contract.
Yeah, and that's how you get over the top if you have bloated contracts, like the Sixers do. They went for it, which I'm so jealous you have a team that is relevant. Like, these are all
What are you
conversations.
talking about? You're at the Checkers Challenge.
Oh, is that happening? Are they building barbershops in the Checkers Challenge? That's amazing. It looks incredible. It's like 2K come to life over there in Chicago. Did they abandon it completely?
They just stopped talking about it.
Yeah. What a conspiracy to rob me from my joy watching RJ Barrett defeat Steph Curry in the Checkers Challenge finals.
Yeah, Shake Milton's contract is vaguely league minimum for, I think it's, this year he made 1.4. He's got the hinky special here, like
Yeah.
1.7, 1.8, and then roughly 2 million through 2023. If he can become like a starting caliber player, even a low starting caliber player, he's going to be worth to the team so much more than that.
Everything fits. This is the John Starks rise. Like everyone loves this story. It usually happens in big markets somehow, but because people care about these teams. But bagging groceries to starting to an all-star, we love this stuff, and usually there's something cool about this player, and it could be as simple as a cool name like Starks, being Asian like Lin, or having another cool name like Shake. It's very simple. It's like Shake, baby. If his name was Jared Bayless, you'd just be like,
Could
whatever.
he pay more?
Jared Jack 2. It's like, whatever.
How do you think life is in the bubble? We're getting these vlogs from guys like JaVale McGee or Matisse Thybulle.
King.
We're getting lots of social media content. How do you think life is in the bubble? Early on, there were some grumbles. Now, guys have sort of settled in. Does it look like it's fun?
I forget what it feels like to be the best basketball players on earth and to be sequestered just with each other, but it looks really fun to me, man. Like, I don't know. There's still, I mean, the barbershop went viral. It was like a standalone barbershop that kind of mirrored the 2K village, and they're setting up all these things. Slowly it's taking form, you know, and we see footage of practices and rooms that they're hanging out in. I think it looks fun, but I've never been on a cruise, and I've always wanted to go to camp. I've never been to sleepaway camp, but like, aside from knowing that you're the best at something and you have options, this is pretty fun, right?
My gut instinct is that in 2 years, we're going to hear about all these players who conspired to change teams and ally in the Barocco bubble.
This is awesome. I love it.
Because you see guys on other teams just hanging out with each other all the time because
The
they
tamper
might know
bubble.
them. They might be, you know, teammates or guys who knew each other in college or AAU. Like, you just don't know how these guys connect with each other. Maybe they both live in the same city during the off season, but you just saw like Chris Paul kind of like hanging with Paul George. Like, you guys actually weren't even on OKC at the same time.
Yeah, it's like Bam Adebayo being like, I kind of like tzatziki sauce. Again with the tzatziki? Yes. But yeah, I mean, like, this is awesome. My friend was joking, like, why didn't someone get an art gallery in there? Just have a room, because these guys are just wandering around being like, oh, some of you are into art.
Wasn't that me?
Was that you on the thread?
That was me on text.
You know, like, why not in, you know, like, legalize everything? I'm not even trying to be political, but like like brothels, you know, businesses, and like
I'm saying stock it with Andrew Kuo basketball portraiture
oh yes, right,
at
right.
exorbitant prices.
Yeah, a couple bucks.
But seriously, why isn't there an art gallery?
That would be fun. Or like, what are things that
Just have rotating art comes in. Players are into it. They can go check it out.
a Supreme shop,
They can
right?
buy stuff that they like.
Yeah, just like a Miami gallery should like move their inventory in and rotate shows, and there should be a Supreme. There should be a like whatever. The barbershop reminds me of that Prada and Marfa, so it got me thinking about that project. You know, that freestanding Prada that kind of decays, that has not been maintained on the
Yes.
highway. And why can't we do something like that, but for real? Like, make a mini mall, have brands like, not to get into a Kanye rant, but like the Gap in there, or like Yeezy, you know, like that would be really fun.
The Gap, dude. We need chrome hearts. Just chrome hearts at every step.
Get Kanye in there. Just put Kanye West in the bubble and just have him go off. What'd you think about that rant, that campaign speech?
Yeah, I loved it. It was great. That was really good. Very convincing,
Yeah.
and he won my vote.
Everything that Kanye does, and I think slowly but surely Twitter, because it's all about Twitter, Twitter's reaction to him is, I think, in my opinion, is the right one, which is like, oh, we shouldn't take him word for word anymore. This guy is struggling, and he's so good at one thing, and we assume he'll be good at something else, but he's not good at something else, and he doesn't need help with a capital H, but like, you know, he's weeping in front of people talking about these really alarming kind of thoughts in his head. Like, if we're helping Kevin Love and DeMar DeRozan and respecting their mental space, we can extend that same courtesy to Kanye West.
Yeah, at the same time, he's the one doing this.
That's
And,
okay. We don't have to pay attention.
Well, that's the problem here, right? Is that by the default of his celebrity, Kanye doing anything becomes newsworthy in ways that it absolutely should not, but we pay attention to it. So it becomes this vicious circle of Kanye doing or saying something that is outrageous and people responding to it. And like, he is the one who says, oh, well, it's time to promote a new album. I'm going to run for president. I'm going to do a speech. It's not like he's doing that at home and we're prying into his business.
Yeah.
He's doing
shooting
this
shots.
shit. It's not like Kevin Love is like, by the way, you know, I had panic attacks while I was playing and I hid it from you. This is completely different. This is someone making a spectacle of themselves. And yes, we can collectively say, I don't care about you, Kanye. Just do your own thing. But he's so well known and people are interested, and whether or not they even care, they do bequeath him with their attention.
Yeah, I mean, he falls into a culture that does care about everything he says, but also, like, mental illness doesn't look the same every way. Like, the way Kevin Love and DeMar DeRozan treated it, I thought was, like, wonderful, but you put it in a box. Kanye West doesn't look like that. Like, depression doesn't look the same anywhere, you know? It's person to person. And he is a very forward person. And he does not retreat. That's not in his DNA. And I think we have to take that. I mean, we're never going to give him the benefit of the doubt. But, like, in this news cycle, like, why do I care that Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith, like, have an open relationship? Like, why am I reading about this? I don't know.
But why did they come out and announce that? Why did they put that on television?
I don't know, man. And
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
we can't say, well, why is the public responding to what Kanye does? Or why is the public
no, we know why.
enamored by it? They came out and
shot
did this
Schadenfreude.
shit.
Yeah.
No, but it's not that exactly. It's that they came out and announced it. They're like, here's something for you to talk about. The fact that we have an open relationship and Jada Pinkett has been boning a young R&B singer. Like, we're going to put that out there. Discuss.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's weird, and you know, and people express themselves in different ways, and I don't know what it feels like to be a celebrity. I don't understand that world at all. I heard celebrities are really struggling with masks because the paparazzi can't take photos of them. I'm like, this makes sense, and what a weird problem. Like, I don't know what that's like. But the Kanye thing, like, he's always gonna do this thing, and it wasn't like some dingy basement. Like, there wasn't much to it, and
I also don't think anyone really did care.
I agree.
It,
too. Yeah.
it trended on Twitter because that's what happens.
Yeah.
When, I mean, look, Dykeman trended on Twitter for like 3 days straight. Like, Kanye, as popular as a video of a stripper dancing outside in the Bronx.
I know.
Wow.
When I'm around normal, functioning, well-adjusted people, and I say something about Ben Simmons, they're like, "Who's that?" I'm like, "Oh, he's a basketball player, da-da-da, BMM." And they're just like, "We don't know what you're talking about." It's like, we don't care at all. I'm like, right, I get it. But Ben Simmons trends on my feed because the internet knows how I think.
Well, it's like, all right, what's trending here on Twitter today? And you're like, okay, let's see. Nicki Minaj,
Oh, it's just preggers.
Kasich, shout out to Ernie Johnson.
Wait,
Mark
did he
Cuban.
expose John Kasich?
Newt Gingrich, I presume. Meek Mill. You know, you're just like, what does it take to trend? Who knows?
That's true. I think, like, and
Does Kasich do anything newsworthy other than there was an announcement that he might speak? Or someone said he might speak at the DNC? Like, who cares?
our skill moving forward has to be fine-tuned into avoiding stories that don't matter to us. I think thinking that you're on Twitter and having to accept stories about Kanye, Nicki Minaj, Kasich, and Phase 4 is too much. It's too much. And
You don't have to live your life caring about John Kasich.
it's like, well,
Shout out to Ernie Johnson.
Kasich is trending. I have to have a take. And you read it and you have a take, and that's how Twitter works. But, God, it feels so good not to care about some things. Like, I just don't care about what the White House says.
Yeah, the whole like Bari Weiss fiasco. I don't read her columns. I don't have any particular opinions on any of that. It felt so refreshing to completely opt out of that entire. I didn't read her essay about why she left the New York Times. It just it was really nice to not pay an iota of attention to anything she did.
Yeah.
I think I also might have her name blocked, from months ago, if I remember correctly.
I recommend everyone to opt out of any Fauci talk. Just don't. It doesn't matter. We're not talking about anything important, but it's a hot button topic. Like the new news story that Trump doesn't know if he's going to step down if he isn't elected. Like, just opt out of that. It doesn't take any mental gymnastics.
Man, that was such a painful one because everyone's immediate response was so predictable. Like, wow, this is terrifying. This is scary.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, first of all, what was he supposed to say?
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
He was talking about fraud, right?
but also, no matter what happens, I will definitely step down. No politician would say, I will definitely step down no matter what happens.
True.
I just mean, especially one who's been yelling about voter fraud
Yeah.
and is going to try to do voter suppression. You would never say, oh, yeah, I'm going to absolutely agree with whatever anyone says. No. And, you know, it was interpreted as different because I am in agreement that Trump has never conceded a loss in his life. And I've said this since he got elected, that I think the day after he loses an election is going to be very harrowing.
Yeah, we'll
And
see.
They're going to try to fight the results of the election because I think at this point it looks like Trump is going to get hammered.
Yeah.
You know, just what the polls are right now.
I think
that could
so.
change, but
15 weeks out. Can you believe it?
I know it's crazy. But it looks like he's going to get smoked.
I think so.
And is he the kind of person who ever concedes taking an L? Well, he hasn't done that in his life.
Yeah.
So from the jump, I've said we'll probably have to pull him out of a spider hole in like 2035.
Right. I'm still president no matter what you say.
I mean, like, just have to do the old Gaddafi treatment, you know,
like,
2 decades from
Yeah.
now.
I actually technically never stepped down. It's like Steve Mills just being like, I still have an office next to the man, so I'm still technically president.
So yes, I actually do agree with the concerns that people have who are voicing concerns about that statement, but that statement itself did not bother me particularly.
Nothing he
all
says.
makes sense.
Yeah, if you tune out everything he says, it's a better life, man. And it's not to disengage. I watch the news for like 8 hours every day. The TV's on in the back, but I just cannot care. And
But what he says has no value.
it doesn't.
It's junk food. It's garbage.
Yeah.
It's not even that he doesn't even have opinions. It's drivel.
Yeah.
And to waste your time, except for when he does something that's funny. Some of those clips of him with was it Mike Wallace?
Yep.
Some of those clips were funny.
Rasheed Wallace's older brother.
Son. Some of those clips were funny when he's like, "Yeah, the test you have to identify elephants," and Trump's like, "No, it's much more hard than that." Like,
Count
like
100
counting backwards.
from by sevens. And he started doing it. He's like, no, it's much harder.
That was funny. I like that shit.
It was funny. But you know, also he does things like handle a pandemic poorly. That it's his actions that cause this. So I am also mad at him. You know, so it's just like,
Oh well, yes. I'm not saying he doesn't matter. I'm saying the words that come out of his mouth, unless they are humorous,
yeah,
are of no interest to me.
yeah. And this is a basketball thing. This is like a food thing. This is just something I've
So like a burger bubble thing.
yeah, pretty much. I mean, you cannot goad me into like an MJ discussion at all. Tatum doesn't work on me anymore.
Yeah.
What else doesn't work? Wanting it more doesn't work on me. Kobe doesn't work on me anymore. And all of these three players, Tatum is good. Michael Jordan is great. Kobe is great, but you cannot. Tatum is not the second best player in the East. Jordan is not a top 10 player because which top 10 player quits on their team in their prime? And Kobe Bryant is solidly between 20 and 30. He's awesome. Respect.
See, you've even been swayed by the tactics of the BMM. What 3 players did you mention next to each other?
Tatum.
Jordan, Kobe,
Right.
Tatum. Oh, absolutely. Yes, those 3. Start one, bench one, cut one.
My hand,
Okay.
it's getting smaller, turning green.
Start Jordan, bench Tatum, cut Kobe.
It's like when I was little, I thought if I ate enough green things, I would turn green. It's like, oh, I'm gonna eat so much spinach, I'm gonna turn green. I'm like, now I'm a damn adult. I'm like, am I turning green?
That is so little green hand.
Okay, Tatum, LeBron, and then who else?
Wilt Chamberlain. Okay. Start Tatum. Cut. Oh, that's a tough one.
Is Tatum the fourth best player on the Celtics?
Definitely third.
Yeah. Well, it's do you have Smart or Brown though?
I have Smart, and
Smart's
Kemba is
better.
better than him.
Yeah, me too. And then Brown and Hayward are kind of a gobbledygook of a chowder. It's like a Hayward. It's a procedural chowder.
Yeah, they're kind of just like poor man's versions of Tatum, who's a poor man's version of Desmond Mason.
Or the ethical god Tobias Harris, who is winning me over on social.
I don't think he is the perfect fit for the Sixers with Embiid and Simmons, but I think he's okay.
Who?
And he's Tobias, and he's really picking up the slack by being awesome.
Yeah.
I like him a lot. He seems very smart and like a genuinely great dude.
I thought he was a biscuit bully for a second when that footage came out of him teasing my favorite player, Matisse Thybulle. But he's just a great guy. And then there's that footage of Thybulle kind of like shadowing him in warm-ups before a game. Tobias seems like the best. Boban loves him. Thybulle loves him. The city of Philly loves him. I'm into it.
Our buddy Charlie Widows, who used to work for the Sixers and now works for the Clippers. I remember talking with him about Tobias right when that trade had happened. And he's like, Tobias is actually the best dude.
I love it.
It's like he's not just like a good guy. He's the best dude. And at a time like this, he has also won me over with his good dudery. Mm-hmm. And
why does he get traded so much?
I don't know. I mean, as a basketball player, he's pretty good.
He's league average, which is very good.
He's also, I think the problem with someone like Tobias is that he presents the problem of being good enough but not great. He's never really the problem, but he's also always a guy that you can envision a better response for. Or you know what I mean? Like, you don't look at Tobias and say, okay, we've got our tweener power forward, small forward position settled for the next decade. You're like, I don't really know which one he is. He's kind of a 3. He's kind of a 4. He's not hyper efficient. He's not really a shooter. He's just kind of like a jack of all trades. Mm-hmm. And we could probably differentiate some skill sets in another way.
Is he a middleman?
Very much a middleman.
Mm-hmm.
But
A good version of a middleman.
But to what you were saying before, I think Tobias is, he's not as good of a defender as Tatum is, but also they're not that different. They kind of do the same thing. Tobias scores 20 a game. Tatum scores like 26. Their efficiency is identical.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They neither of them pass as much.
Yeah.
They're not that different.
Yeah, and the advanced stats will favor Tatum, but they're written by Celtics fans, so that's a wash. But
it's surreal to see people quoting PIPM. I'm like, they are literally Celtics fans. There's huge Celtics fans who created that stat.
Yeah.
I can't even listen to them mention his PIPM. I'm like, dude, it's irrelevant. It does not matter.
Guys, this equation is a work in process. Is Tatum amazing? It's like, not yet. We're getting there, though.
Oh, yeah. You know who's really elite? A guy who scores league average efficiency, doesn't pass, kind of low turnovers, wing defender. That guy, yeah, he's like a top 10 player in the league. He's a superstar. Like, none of that even makes sense.
And it's so funny that he's the chosen one because he's not that thrilling of a player. He doesn't have pizzazz. He doesn't have a handle or a dunk move. He yells a lot, but like Tobias, he squares up to the basket and like is a straight line guy. So I don't know. Is this your king?
I know. People love the little jab step, turnaround, fadeaway stuff, and then like the occasional dunk. Again, I think Tatum is a good player who's kind of gross.
Yeah, I prefer Jaylen Brown. Heap the
Yeah,
praise.
same.
Switch PIPM to Jalen Brown next.
Yeah, Jalen Brown to me is, since he developed his handle,
Yeah.
and he's got a little more pitter patter to
Yeah.
his game that he didn't have a few years ago.
Yeah.
I find him more fun to watch, and
Yeah.
I think Smart and Kemba are
Oh,
by
electric.
far their most entertaining players.
Yeah, and Smarts doesn't score enough because they're looking for a scorer to fill this role, and Kemba wasn't their own. And I'm worried about Kemba as a basketball fan. I don't know if his knee's ever going to be right, man.
Oh, I mean, we talked way too much about the Celtics, which is obviously just a
No.
product of the nefarious impact of the BMM. Like, why are we talking about the Celtics? Here's my thing. No, about the Sixers. If they lose to the Bucks, so be it.
Yeah, the Bucks
You
are
know,
better.
so be it. They had a better record. They have a highly
MVP.
optimized.
Oh, can we
they-
talk
they
about
have-
this award?
What I was going to say, one second. I'm saying the Bucks have the best player on the court. They have a highly optimized system of dork ball that surrounds that MVP back-to-back candidate. You lose to that team, you like doff your cap. Hey, best record in basketball, best defense, elite offense.
Best middleman.
They got a good middleman. But, take your hat off. That's a well-constructed team around an absolute superstar who is arguably the best player in the league. You take your hat off to them. If the Sixers lose to anyone else in the East, I will be irritated. I will not be irritated at Embiid or Simmons or at Brett Brown. I will be irritated at the front office for not being able to build an adequate infrastructure around having the best two players in any other series. Like, that's wild. To have that advantage of the best two players in any series and lose, that's an indictment of your front office. It's not an indictment of those players, because that is the case. That doesn't mean those guys will be the best in that series. But Simmons and Embiid are both better than anyone on the Celtics. They're both better than anyone on the Raptors. They're both better than anyone on the Heat. They're both better than anyone on the Pacers.
Yeah, but that's a bubble of a team. Two
But
players.
you know what I'm saying? I'm
Yeah.
annoyed if they lose those series because it means the front office failed them. You can't lose a series with the two best players in the league or in the team.
But you got to save your energy during the bubble, right? Because I think of like cooking shows. If you have amazing cooks and you're like, okay, cook your dish in a snowstorm. I'm like, okay, anything can happen now. This is it resembles to me more of a one and done bracket, even though it's going to be a 7-game series every time. But what happens in the bubble isn't like a true simulation of the game because there's too many variables going into this. Who's sick? Who's sitting out? Who has to go to 7? Who can just sweep through 4? Are they happy? Are they rested? Do they have the virus? So whatever happens, let's say the Heat, Bam Adebayo takes out Simmons, and people are like, well, that's an indictment on Simmons. I'm like, no, this has asterisks to infinity.
Oh, no doubt. My thing is just that if you have the two best players on your team and you were in the Sixers position where you had draft assets and you had cap space and all those things, and you were unable to build a team with the right complementary pieces to make sure that you are significantly better than anyone you play against, I hold that against you as a GM. But I'm with you in this situation. Look, someone has a bad series, someone gets sick, you can't hold that against them. Like Joel Embiid shot 37% and averaged 17 points a game against the Raptors. You can look at it and say they lost because of Embiid. But in reality, if they had a backup center who was capable, they would have, they would have beaten the brakes off the Raptors in 6 games. Mm-hmm. So I really don't want to point at individual players who are always great because they had a bad series. You got to build a team with a good enough bench and with good enough complementary places that you can overwhelm teams despite your superstars having suboptimal performances.
It's those Danny Greens, man. It's those Tony Parkers, crucial. I mean, Thiago Splitter, Boris Diaw. These are the players that series turn on. I mean, Andre Iguodala was a Finals MVP.
Right, so my thing is look at the Lakers. This doesn't have to be about the Sixers. The Lakers have the two best players in any series, except for, I'm talking about the West now, except for, I guess, you could argue that Kawhi is as good as LeBron or Anthony Davis. I don't really believe that, but you could argue that.
Davis, maybe.
I would not argue
together.
that, but
Yeah.
But that's the only team that you really look at and say, okay, you don't have a superstar advantage over. So it comes down to, did the Lakers build out the rest of that roster
Nope.
in a reasonable way
Yeah.
that they can put up with LeBron or Anthony Davis playing below their potential and still win a series against a good team?
No, Pelinka did not do a good job. He gave up too much for AD, which kind of you have to do, but AD forced that trade. And he was left with players like Caruso, Rondo, who got hurt. I'm looking forward to seeing this because LeBron James has to go into superhero mode, and this is how we love him, and he's done it before. I'm happy to have this, but it's too bad it's filled with stacks of hamburgers. That's unfortunate, man, because there's no way to use this data. You know what I mean? Whoever wins this is like, well, this is kind of useless information.
But I still do think the Lakers have a very good chance of winning a title because those guys are that good. And that's kind of what the playoffs usually come down to. Who's got the better stars? But it's not a guarantee.
Yeah, Dirk beat LeBron.
Yeah, exactly. And, you can go back and we've talked about that series and look at it and see what happened was that Miami didn't build a team correctly around that talent. And because it was a moment of confusion in the early 10s, I think, we were all watching, I don't know, what were we even watching? 2010. No one knows what happened in 2010.
What were we
It was
watching?
it was a bizarre time.
Is that like the OC in the hills? Like, what were we doing? Were we listening to Burial and dubstep?
I have no recollection of 2010. No one does.
I was listening to James Blake dubstep 12 inches.
We just were watching Limitless.
Well, Animal Collective's Merriweather Post Pavilion just had its 10-year anniversary. So it's, that era when I was obsessed with electronic music. What rapper was out then? Oh, yeah. Okay, this is all coming back to me. This is after Thug Motivation 101. We were listening to D. Pharrell, maybe. What was the anthem in New York? I don't know. My brain.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. 2010 is a mystery. It has been kind of erased from human comprehension. Yeah. And you go back and you look at it and you say, oh, we all thought LeBron was being a baby and was a choker and was scared to shoot. And you look at their team and you're like, oh, they didn't have anyone who could make threes. So the Mavs just all stood in the paint and LeBron was trying to figure out what to do but couldn't create good looks because the guys around him were Joel Anthony and Haslam, and Bosch wasn't shooting threes yet, and Wade couldn't shoot. And they didn't have enough guys who could spread the floor, but we viewed it as a lit choke.
Yeah. That's so weird. So weird. How come no one gets on Wade for not being able to shoot? Go the rings, right.
2010, man, it was crazy.
It was a crazy time, man. I'm bummed. There's too much chaos in this burger bub. There's too many different patties flying around, different sauces. Like, you're gonna put like a short rib in that burger now? All right, pastrami. It's too much, man. Oh, there's a veggie.
Yeah, is that a special sauce? Is that again with tzatziki?
Yeah. It's like, oh, this is just a pile of vegetables. Well, it's a burger. Like, what flies as a burger? If you fold a pizza in half, is that a cheeseburger?
Find out next week on The Perfect Pod.
Cookies.
Cookies.